Israel is a country that welcomes thousands of new immigrants. It establishes new villages and towns, gets rid of dilapidated neighborhoods, and strives continually for better housing conditions. All this has made building one of the central branches of the economy. But the goals have not yet been fulfilled. There is still much work to be done. Tens of thousands of workers all over the country, expensive raw materials, diverse equipment and tools, as well as financial investments that run to hundreds of millions of pounds, flow into the creative machine of building. New houses and structures take their place in the ever-changing landscape. Outdated tools and work methods are still in use, but they are gradually being discarded for improved means and better methods, the outcome of modern advanced techniques, all to one purpose, to do things quicker and cheaper, to simplify and to make things easier. But part of building work will remain for some time to come pure manual work, strenuous work that cannot as yet be replaced by machines. This is especially so when one talks about the finishing job. Can something be done to improve these jobs? Let's take tiling, for example. Now, careful, don't tread. This is a strip that's just been tiled. The mortar under it is still fresh. You can't imagine the hard work and care that went into it. Floors in Israel are usually made of terrazzo tiles. The cost of tiling in building apartment houses is somewhere between 7 and 12% of the construction costs. The tiles are put down, tile after tile, with simple work tools. A tap with the fist and a few knocks with a short hammer. The tile is set in mortar. The tiles are arranged in groups to the left of the worker. The container with the mortar to his right. The actions needed to lay down one tile are repeated over and over again for every tile separately, as each one is laid by the next in a row of 3 or 4. At the end of the row, the surplus mortar is scraped off and returned to the container. Mortar must not be wasted. Let's take a closer look at the tiling operation. First operation, a general leveling out and a final leveling for just one tile. Second operation, bringing the mortar from the container and spreading it out in a uniform layer for one tile. Third operation, laying and fixing it in position with a tap of the fist. Fourth operation, knocking with the hammer for balancing and leveling the tile on the mortar. And fifth operation, checking with the level and the final leveling of the tile. The operations are repeated over and over again. There are slight variations resulting from the personal experience and habits of each tile layer. Simple manual work. What can we improve here? The same operations can be extended without undue strain to a row of 5 tiles. It is quite easy to level out, bring mortar, and spread it over an area within these limits. Extending this area of work will make it difficult for the worker, and this is not our intention. We will keep within the limits of the arm's reach, without undue strain, not more, but certainly not less. Remember, leveling out the sand with the trowel should be done for an area of 5 tiles with repeated rhythmical movements. Also, spreading out the mortar should not be done for each tile separately. The work should go on uninterruptedly, and mortar brought for each row, a trowel for every tile. Spreading the mortar can be done without difficulty for every row. When needed, the mortar can be spread lightly between the laying of one tile and the next. Now, you'll probably ask, if we lay out the sand, transfer and spread the mortar at one go for 5 tiles, then why lay each tile separately? Well, each tile has to be laid separately. Watch what happens if 2 tiles are laid at once. Knocking on one tile compresses the mortar. The surplus goes under the second tile and raises it up. Knocking on the second tile compresses the mortar again, and then the first tile rises, and so on. In the end, laying each tile separately will cut down the number of knocks and save time. If 3 tiles are laid at once, the knocking will increase even more, and the work time will be longer still. The surplus mortar is compressed when the tiles are set in place from one tile to the next, from the first to the second, from the second to the third, and then back again from the third to the second, and so on. Surplus mortar that is not removed causes more loss of working time. We won't bother to tell you what happens if we lay 4 or 5 tiles at one go. As has been said, efficient work calls for the laying of the tiles one by one. The repeated returning to the container of surplus mortar before the new leveling cuts down efficiency. If the leveling for the first row is done over a breadth of 1.5 tiles, and then for the following row over a breadth of only 1 tile, most of the surplus mortar can be left where it is, except for the small quantity at the right-hand side. Remember, leveling off the sand over a breadth of 1.5 tiles for the whole of the first row will save a lot of movements at the end of each row. The lower layer of sand is prepared, and following the new method of laying the mortar, it is brought to the row of 5 tiles. 1, 2, 3. Are 5 transfers of mortar really necessary to carry out this operation? No. By changing this trowel for an improved one, we can reduce the number of movements for transferring mortar from 5 to only 2. But not every change, even if it is to the good, is immediately accepted with understanding. We all have our reservations regarding changes. The reaction of each worker is generally influenced by his individual character and experience, and from a form of conservatism which is deeply rooted in work habits. It is generally not easy to get sympathy and understanding for something new. To introduce an improvement needs explanation and persuasion. Let us compare this trowel, a widely used tool in the building trade in Israel, with an improved trowel, adapted especially to the needs of the tiling process, carefully planned and completed only after repeated practical tests. The surface of the usual trowel, made of steel, had an area of 184 square centimeters. The surface of the new improved trowel, made of duraluminum, has an area of 423 square centimeters. A larger surface means a larger quantity of mortar. 1 lot of mortar, enough for 1 tile, as against 2.5 lots, enough for half a row. True, enlarging the surface area of the trowel increases the amount of mortar taken at one go, but will the strain increase to the same extent and make the work harder for the tiler? We do not intend to raise tiling output by increasing the strain of the worker. Let's examine the effort involved in working with the 2 tools. The center of gravity of the old trowel when carrying a full load of mortar is at G, through which acts the weight of 1 unit of the load of mortar. And here the center of gravity is under the handle, through which acts the weight of 2.5 units of mortar. The action of the weight of the mortar in the 2 cases flows through the handle held and acts on point A at the wrist. This affects the strain on the worker. The difference in the distance from the center of gravity G to the point A gives an advantage to the improved tool, despite the difference in the weight of mortar in the 2 trowels. There are 20 units of strain in the usual trowel, as against 17.5 units in the improved version. Moving a greater quantity of mortar at one go reduces by 50% the number of transfers of mortar for a row of 5 tiles with a relatively smaller effort. It's worthwhile, isn't it, to raise the output of tiling without increasing the strain on the worker? The improved trowel has further advantages. It makes it possible to level sand with fewer and easier movements, leveling off the sand with a new tool for a row of 5 tiles width, transferring the mortar with 2 movements instead of 5, spreading the mortar in one go for the whole row with less movement, laying the tiles one by one. All this brought an approximate saving of 30% in the time taken to tile 1 square meter, and an increase of about 40% in tiling performance. Tapping with the fist before using the hammer is a necessary operation in tiling. Now, tapping with one's fists on hundreds of tiles is strenuous work. There's no doubt about that. But knocking with the hammer without using the fist first increases the leveling out time, sometimes weakens the tile, and might even break it. An improved version of the hammer is proposed as an easier alternative to the fist, and it also cuts down the knocking for leveling. The hammer has 2 handles. One handle has a knocker of rubber rigidly fixed on. This serves as a substitute for the fist. The second handle, rather longer than the other, serves for the light knocks needed for leveling. Both the handles are made of wood and can be replaced if necessary. Method study, adaptation of the tools to the method, prevention of undue strain on the worker, and care for his comfort. These are the key to improvements and savings in work. So far, improvements suggested have been connected with method and implementation. But there are also hidden possibilities for improvement and savings by changing the product. For instance, it would be worthwhile to change the accepted tile size of 20 by 20 centimeters to 25 by 25. To make it clear to you, the border lines have been specially marked to differentiate between the limits of the tiles of different sizes. As an example, let's watch the tiling of 2 limited areas of floor, using the same method at a uniform pace, each one separately but parallel. It does take a little longer to lay a tile of 25 by 25 than it does to lay a tile of 20 by 20 centimeters. But since the large tile takes up more room, instead of 25 tiles, only 16 tiles are needed to cover an area of 1 square meter. That is to say, a reduction of the operations needed to tile a square meter, and so a saving in time. The use of tiles of the size of 25 by 25 is not widespread in Israel because of the limitations of the existing industrial equipment. Enlarging the dimensions of the tile does not necessitate, in this case, a change in thickness. In the mass production of tiles, there would be no justification for paying a proportionally higher price than is paid today for tiles to cover the same area. The performance in tiling a row with tiles of 25 by 25 centimeters is superior to the tiling performance with the ordinary tiles of today. The small difference in the time taken to lay a row and the increase in area, even without the improvements in work methods, would produce a saving of 15% in the work time and increased performance for each unit of area. By adding to this the improved tools and methods, which have already been mentioned, tiling with tiles of 25 by 25 centimeters would increase the saving in work time by 33%. Tiling work is only one example of the great value to be derived from the study of building trades. Every improvement, even if only very small, will manifest itself immediately in saving considerable sums of money, which could be transferred to the building of tens of additional dwellings. Studies to improve methods and means of working, efficient organization and management, finding better and cheaper materials, all this will help to raise the standard of living. All this will give us better and cheaper housing. For the consolidation and advancement of the economy, for the benefit of the individual and of society as a whole, we should integrate theory and practice, engineer and technician, foreman and worker. Productive and fruitful work is the key to progress and advancement.